Holdens 308 V8, Australia's forgotten muscle car legend. For decades, you've been told it was just a cheap copy of American Iron. But what if I told you GM deliberately buried this engine because it was too good? Here's 10 shocking truths about the 308 that Detroit never wanted you to know. Truth number 1. Holdens 308 was built on a shoestring budget but outperformed expectations. Back in the early 70s, Holdens' engine team had about a quarter of what Chevrolet was working with. While Detroit was throwing money at the problem, the boys in Melbourne had to get creative. And bloody hell did they deliver? The 308 was designed from the ground up for Australia's brutal conditions. Extreme heat, dust, long distances. This wasn't just another American V8 with different badges. The engineers knew our summers would cook a traditional muscle car engine, so they built something tougher. What they created was a lightweight, compact V8 that could handle 45-degree days and still perform. The block was stronger, the cooling system was better, and the whole package was designed to last. While American V8s were melting down in Alice Springs, the 308 just kept going. The kicker? They did it all for peanuts compared to what GM was spending in Detroit. Australian engineering at its finest, making more with less. Truth number 2. GM executives silenced the 308 overnight to protect American muscle cars. Here's where it gets interesting. In 1975, just as the 308 program was hitting its stride, a phone call came down from Detroit. Game over. Pack it up. The promising V8 program that could have revolutionized Australian performance was shut down overnight. The official reason? Cost cutting. The real reason? The 308 was starting to make GM's precious Chevy 350 look ordinary. When your subsidiary in Australia is building a better engine than your flagship American operation, that's a problem for corporate egos. GM's global hierarchy wasn't about to let some upstart Australian engineers show up Detroit. The 308 had to go, not because it was bad, but because it was too good. Corporate politics killed what could have been Australia's greatest engine before it really got started. The timing was perfect for GM. The oil crisis gave them cover to axe the program without admitting the real reason. But inside Holden, everyone knew what had really happened. Truth number 3. The 308 produced nearly 380 horsepower, almost matching a Corvette. Before GM pulled the plug, Holden had built a secret prototype that was making serious power. We're talking 380 horsepower from a naturally aspirated 308. That's Corvette territory in the mid-70s. This wasn't some backyard hot rod either. This was a fully engineered, production-ready engine that Holden was planning to put in their performance cars. The power delivery was smooth, the torque curve was broad, and the thing would rev like a dream. When GM executives saw the dyno sheets, they reportedly went pale. Here was an Australian engine that could match America's best, built for a fraction of the cost. The prototype was quietly shipped to Detroit, where it disappeared into GM's vault. The engine that made it to production was deliberately neutered. Restricted intake ports, conservative cam timing, the works. But for a brief moment, Holden had built something that could have changed everything. Truth number 4. John DeLorean personally ordered the engine's development to stop. This is the one that'll blow your mind. John DeLorean was running GM's engine division when the 308 project got serious. And he made it crystal clear. No Australian V8 would be allowed to outperform an American muscle car. DeLorean saw the potential in the 308 and recognized it as a threat to GM's American operations. His directive was simple: keep the Aussies in line. Corporate pride was more important than engineering excellence. The irony is incredible. Here's a guy who'd later build his own car company, talking about innovation and breaking boundaries, while simultaneously crushing genuine innovation happening in his own company. The 308 was victim to the same corporate politics that would eventually drive DeLorean himself out of GM. DeLorean's decision didn't just kill an engine program, it killed Australia's chance to lead the world in V8 technology. All because American executives couldn't handle being shown up by their colonial cousins. Truth number 5. Holden's 308 was lighter and more efficient than the Chevy 350. The numbers don't lie. The 308 was about 30 pounds lighter than the Chevy 350, with stronger internals and better power-to-weight ratio. While American engines were built heavy and over-engineered, the Aussies had created something more elegant. The 308's block was designed with thinner walls where possible, thicker where needed. The result was an engine that was both lighter and stronger than its American cousin. The crankshaft was better balanced, the pistons were lighter, and the whole rotating assembly was more efficient. But here's the thing. This information was deliberately kept quiet. GM didn't want anyone comparing the 308 favorably to the 350. Internal memos from the time show executives were concerned about market confusion if customers knew the Australian engine was superior. The 308 also returned better fuel economy while making similar power. In the post-oil crisis world, that should have been a massive selling point. Instead, GM buried the data and positioned the 308 as a budget alternative to real American muscle. Truth number 6. Project Wombat. A 340 horsepower Holden V8 that crushed the Chevy 350, then was erased. Project Wombat was Holden's secret high-performance 308 variant that was supposed to go into the next generation of muscle cars. The numbers were incredible. 340 horsepower, 380 pound-foot of torque, and a red line that would make a small block Chevy weep. In head-to-head testing against the Chevy 350, the Wombat engine didn't just win, it dominated. Better power, better torque curve, better reliability, better everything. The test results were so embarrassing for Detroit that GM executives flew to Australia personally to shut it down. What happened next was corporate vandalism. All the prototype engines were destroyed, the test data was confiscated, and the engineers were reassigned to other projects. It was like Project Wombat never existed. But some of the engineers kept copies of the specs, and decades later, engine builders have recreated the Wombat configuration. Those lucky enough to drive one say, it's the engine the 308 always should have been. An absolute weapon that would have rewritten Australian performance history. Truth number 7. The 308 lasted 22 hours longer in races than the Chevy 350. Peter Brock's race teams discovered something GM didn't want publicised. The 308 was significantly more durable than the Chevy 350 in endurance racing. We're talking 22 hours longer average life in race conditions. The 308's superior cooling system, better oil flow, and stronger bottom end meant it could handle the punishment of long-distance racing better than anything GM was building in America. Brock's team was getting race wins, not just from driver skill, but from engine reliability. GM's response? They made it clear to Brock's team that highlighting the 308's durability advantages was not in the company's best interests. The message was subtle but clear. Keep quiet about how good the Australian engine really was. Racing teams started using the 308's durability as a secret weapon. While competitors were rebuilding engines between races, the 308-powered cars just kept going. But publicly, they had to pretend the American engines were superior. Truth number 8. Engineers were told to restrict intake ports to stop backyard tuners unlocking too much power. This one's particularly sneaky. GM deliberately limited the 308's intake port size, not for performance reasons, but to prevent enthusiasts from easily extracting more power. They were terrified of what would happen if regular punters could make their 308s embarrass Chevy small blocks. The restriction was so effective that even basic port work would unlock massive power gains. Engine builders today still shake their heads at how much GM left on the table. A simple port job and cam change could turn a mild 308 into a genuine weapon. Internal GM documents show they were worried about uncontrolled performance escalation if the 308's true potential was unleashed. They'd rather sell a neutered engine than risk Aussie backyard mechanics showing up Detroit's finest. The irony is that enthusiasts figured it out anyway. By the 80s, modified 308s were regularly embarrassing big block Chevys at the drag strip. GM's restrictions only delayed the inevitable. Truth number 9. Friday afternoon engines are legendary Holden blocks, built with looser rules and more power. Here's some engine folklore that's absolutely true. On Friday afternoons, when the supervisors had knocked off early, Holden's engine builders would occasionally get creative with the tolerances. These Friday afternoon engines are legendary among collectors today. The theory goes that with less oversight, the builders could use the best components, machine to tighter tolerances, and generally build engines that were closer to the 308's true potential. Whether this was deliberate or just coincidence, these engines developed a reputation for being noticeably stronger than regular production units. Engine builders today pay premium prices for original Friday afternoon blocks. They typically have thicker cylinder walls, better bore straightness, and stronger bottom ends. Some of the most powerful naturally aspirated 308s ever built started life as Friday afternoon engines. GM was reportedly aware of these quality variations but chose to turn a blind eye. As long as the engines met minimum specifications, they weren't going to crack down on builders who were actually making the product better. Truth number 10. GM used Holden's engine design secrets to build later V8s while suppressing the 308. The final insult came years later when GM's LS1 V8 appeared with several design features that looked suspiciously familiar to anyone who'd worked on the 308 project. The oil flow patterns, port designs, and combustion chamber shapes all bore striking similarities to the Australian engine. GM had effectively stolen the 308's best ideas to improve their own engines while ensuring the original never reached its potential. The company that killed the 308 for being too good then used its innovations to make their own engines better. The LS1's legendary reliability and performance didn't come from nowhere. It came from lessons learned from the 308's superior design. But GM made sure the Australian engine never got credit for pioneering many of the features that made the LS1 great. Engineers who worked on both projects have confirmed the connection, though officially, GM has never acknowledged it. The 308's DNA lives on in modern GM V8s, even though the original engine was deliberately suppressed. The conclusion: the Holden 308 V8 could have been Australia's greatest engine, lighter, stronger, and more efficient than anything Detroit was building. Instead, it became a victim of corporate politics and American pride. GM killed the 308, not because it was bad, but because it was too good. Today, as we watch the end of Australian car manufacturing, it's worth remembering what we lost. The 308 wasn't just an engine. It was proof that Australian engineers could lead the world. But in the corporate world of the 1970s, being the best wasn't enough if you threatened the wrong people. The next time someone tells you the 308 was just a cheap copy of American iron, remember these 10 truths. The real story isn't about what the 308 was, it's about what it could have been if corporate politics hadn't gotten in the way.